أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, and welcome to this session of Mizan Live. We ran into a little technical difficulty, so we're starting up a little bit late. Inshallah, you forgive us for that. So today we are going to be talking about a new topic, one that is controversial and important, and the Shia are known for, and that is the topic of Tawassul. Tawassul literally means to take something as a wasila, to take something as a tool and as a means to get something done or to accomplish something, etc. It's a very rough translation. And this is something that, if not explained, maybe, if not explained, it can cause many questions to arise. Why? Because people might say that, why call unto anyone other than God when it comes to things that you need, things that you want to get done, and so on. The Shia are known for calling unto and invoking other great righteous individuals, prophets, imams, and so on. And this is regarded as tawassul. And so this is something that can sometimes cause trouble for them because it's misunderstood, because there are questions that need to be answered in that regard, but they're not answered. Or sometimes the answers that are given are not allowed to reach the ears of the masses, so that they know, the Shia kind of know what they're doing here. It's not that they don't know what they're doing, and instead of allowing them and giving them a voice to be able to explain what's going on, what is happening, so unfortunately in this day and age especially, is that the label of shirk is very easily being plastered on the Shia brothers and sisters sometimes in different parts of the world. Anyway, today we want to talk about that a little bit, because we have reached article number 126 of the book, where he is explaining, Ayatollah Subhani is explaining what this is all about. Now, he keeps it very concise. Once again, when I went through this part of the book, I was a little bit surprised that he didn't open it up more. But once again, this is something that if you open it up, it might take books and books and volumes of books to discuss and to see all aspects of it, and see what all the challenges that others have of it, what those challenges are, so that you answer those challenges and questions. So anyway, he keeps it very simple and straightforward, and that's our topic for today. He begins by explaining that, look, in this world that we live in, this world is a world of causes and effects. You want to get something done, you got to make use of other things to get your job done. If you want to accomplish something, you want to get good grades, you have to study. If you want to install something on your wall, you'll need to drill a hole. You have to use the right tools to get things done. Very simple. It's a world of causes and effect, all aspects of our lives. So he starts it off like this because that's where he wants to take the discussion. He wants to take the discussion in this direction of, if a Muslim, if a Shia, for example, invokes someone other than God, well, others are invoking things all their lives to get things done anyway. As a matter of fact, I might call on my friend to help me in a certain situation to get something done. These kinds of things happen. Are these labeled as problematic? Are these labeled as calling unto other than Allah? No, of course they're not. When you use a tool to get some work done, no one says you're committing shirk, or you are looking to other than God to get something that you need done. When you're calling your friend to help you, no one says that's a problem. So he's taking it in this direction, that okay, same thing with when we call unto the Holy Prophet when he's in his grave, for example, and ask him for help. Now, there are different layers to this discussion. I'm just giving it to you right now, an overview, but we're going to go into it. There are different layers, inshallah, that we're going to get to. So, having said that, I just want to start reading and explaining as we go on, because I don't want to skip anything here. So it says, Article 126, resorting to intermediaries, Tawassul. The life of man is constructed on the basis of making use of various intermediary means, or wasa'il it's called, which is the plural of wasila, and causes of nature. So if mankind wants to get stuff done, they have to do it through these means, brothers and sisters. Each of which has its own special features. When we're thirsty, we drink water. When hungry, we eat food, fulfilling our needs by recourse to natural means on condition that such means are not regarded as independent causes in their own right. One more time, let me read it. Fulfilling our needs by recourse to natural means on condition that such means are not regarded as independent causes in their own right, is inherent in Tawheed. This is Tawheed. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't go against Tawheed to take recourse to these means to get things done and to accomplish certain things, achieve certain matters. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. He says there's just one condition, as long as they're not regarded as independent causes in their own right. So, for example, I can't, if I'm drinking water to quench my thirst, can't be like, yes, this water independently and disconnected from all other forces and authorities out there, mainly and namely God, is independently what is quenching my thirst. Okay, that's a problem. I go to the doctor, I'm sick. Doctor says, do this, do that. I'm like, okay, I'm listening to him, and in my mind, I'm taking him as the independent and only reason and cause of why I get better, if I get better, right? As if God has nothing to do with me getting better. This is a problem, yes. He says, but if that condition is met, which usually it is, then it's not a problem. And this is ingrained in Tawheed itself. I mean, we're doing this because God has put us in this life where the things happen through these means. So there's nothing wrong with it. But then he says, there are some who hold that shirk means connecting oneself with and resorting to what is other than God. So before he said this line, Ayatollah Subhani, he kind of made it clear that, look, this is something that's very intuitive. It's common sense. Everyone understands that whatever you want to do in this life, you may take recourse to other things and tools and means to get it done. So if I'm also doing this, Tawassul, it's the same thing. But he says there are some who say that shirk means to connect oneself with and resort to what is other than God. Now this is true only on condition that such intermediary causes and means be given the status of independent and autonomous agency. If, on the other hand, we take these factors as means with which we can attain certain ends, then the principle of Tawheed is not violated. This is very, very obvious, he's saying. If I use a screwdriver to get my work done, that doesn't mean now this is shirk, because I have resorted to something else to get something done. I should only resort to God. No. Same thing when I ask somebody for help. In general, the life of man from the day of his birth onwards is founded on just such a basis. That is, he takes advantage of the extant ways and means at his disposal. Indeed, the progress of science and industry proceeds on this very principle. We understand. Why does science progress? Because we understand. Technology, why does it grow? Why? Because we understand that we have needs. We want to communicate. We want to do stuff. The number of people in the world is growing. They need to be fed quicker than before. Consumption is going up. The consumption rates are going up. Although I have to say, yes, consumerism is too much and consumption is gone overboard in this day and age altogether. But nonetheless, things are happening faster. We need more. And that's why science and technology progress, so that man and mankind can do what? Can get their work done. Yeah? So this is all just how normal life works. No one even thinks twice about this being shirk. So now let's move on to what we're talking about, Tawassul. He says, the legitimacy of making Tawassul, i.e. resorting to intermediary causes and means, in respect of the means offered by nature is clearly indisputable. There's a question here though. What is that question? All right, so this is where I said there's layers to this discussion. He's talking about the first layer of the discussion now. He says, he's playing devil's advocate. He says, or he is about to say, I'll read in a minute. I want to explain it first. He says, look, what you talked about so far, about birth to death, and how we understand that we need to resort to and take recourse to different tools and means to get our work done. And that is why technology and science progress. All of that, that's true. No one has a problem with that, this person will say. But that's for the natural world that we're living in. That is for the physical world. But tawassul has to do with the metaphysical world. It has to do with you invoking someone, yes, who isn't even walking on the face of the earth anymore, is not even alive, for example. Anyway, he says, this person who wants to question it will say, don't compare the physical to the metaphysical. The physical world, in other words, we have permission to make use of whatever we can to get stuff done here. But the metaphysical, who said that's allowed? Who says that that's sanctioned? And so it says, the question here pertains to causes that are beyond nature. Causes which man can only come to know about through divine revelation. Okay, so that's the first layer. Someone will say, I don't have a problem with the natural world and you making use of whatever is around you to get stuff done. But who said that you can call unto, other than God in the metaphysical realm, who says you can call anybody else in the metaphysical realm? Who says you can call angels? Who says you can call imams or the prophet to get things happen, to get things to happen, or make things that you want, wishes that you have to be fulfilled or whatever? Every time something is introduced in the Quran or Hadith literature as a means or wasila, making use of that thing derives from the same authority. That is the basis for when we are allowed. That is the basis for tawassul in respect of natural causes. Okay, this is a hard sentence. He says, look, when it comes to the metaphysical, okay, you better have dalil. You better have proof and reason that this is also a wasila. Other than God, we know God, it can be a wasila for sure. But other than God, anything else also that we want to have as a means in the metaphysical realm that we can invoke and call upon to get us closer to God, or to help us with stuff that's happening even in this dunya. He says Quran or Hadith have to reveal that to us. If Quran and Hadith don't reveal that to us, we don't have permission. How do you know that angels, if you call unto them, they can do anything for you in this life or the next? Can get you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No. Who says we don't know? That's what he's saying here. He's playing devil's advocate. I told subhanahu here, he's elaborating on the question so he can answer it. So I'll read that part again. Every time something is introduced in the Quran or Hadith literature as a means, making use of that thing derives from the same authority that is the basis for tawassul in respect of natural causes. If I, because the Quran or Hadith tell me, I can take a prophet, I can take an angel as a means of getting closer to God, right? Or as a means to get things done in this life for me, whenever the Quran Hadith tell me that that is possible, then I will do such. The same way I have been told by the Quran and the Hadith that I have to resort to natural causes here to get certain effects, that I have to resort to certain tools and means in this natural world to get stuff done and to accomplish and achieve things, that same reason holds there as well. The Quran and Hadith, if they tell me something metaphysical can get something done, can get me closer to God. Right? So the same reason that holds here will hold there too. But the whole question is, this person will be asking, show me where. Show me where in the Quran or Hadith that we have that says you can take anyone other than God in the metaphysical realm as a means of closeness to God, as a means of things happening for you here in this life, etc., etc. That's the whole problem. They say we understand the general principle, yes, that the Quran or Hadith, if they tell us, then we have to listen. But they say, where is it? Show us. Therefore, there are times when we're allowed, given a proper religious motivation, to seek to take advantage of factors beyond the natural realm, while bearing in mind the following 2 points, he says. So, everyone agrees, he's saying, that if these 2 conditions, so he's kind of summing up that question and that challenge that we just had. The only way we can actually call unto someone else in the metaphysical realm is if their 2 points are secured. Number 1, the factors in question that we want to take as a wasila must be clearly established either in the Quran or the Hadith literature as means that can lead to the attainment of goals in this life or the hereafter. Quran or Hadith have to have specified that, 1. And 2, the means and causes are not regarded in any fashion as having principial autonomy or independent status. Rather, we must understand that their capacity to yield results is utterly contingent upon the authority and will of God. So 2 conditions. Person who is asking this question, O person, Ayatollah Subhani is saying this, O person who is bringing forth this challenge of how dare you invoke anyone in the metaphysical realm for stuff to happen in this life or the hereafter for you. Are you saying that if 2 conditions are met, you're going to be cool with it, you're going to be okay with it? He says, yes. What are those 2 conditions? Number 1, Quran and Hadith have to have mentioned it. Number 2, if you are going to resort to that metaphysical entity and do tawassul to that metaphysical entity, you have to do it keeping in mind that that thing is not independent of Allah. No, it's in line with Allah. It's at a lower level of the vertical chain of causes and effects that Allah sits at the top of. If these 2 conditions are met, then you're good, we're good. That's what this person is going to say when he's asking this question and putting forth this challenge. Alright, so you're telling me that if we have Quranic proof for this, then we're good to go? As long as we don't think that that means is an independent means? He says, yes. Ayatollah Subhani brings that famous verse that you've all heard for Tawassul, and he says, look, the Quran says, O you who believe, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, ittaqullah, wabtaghu ilayhi al-wasilah. That it says, O you who believe, be mindful of your duty to God and seek the means, al-wasila, of approaching Him. Okay. And strive in His way in order that ye may succeed, it says. Okay. So he says, look, we got a verse that there are means of getting closer to Him. Alright. Now, whatever those means want to be, we'll talk about this more later. He says it should be noted that means or wasila does not mean the same thing as drawing near, taqarrub. Rather, it refers to anything that is a source of drawing near to God, struggling in the cause of God, as mentioned in the verse quoted above, is one among many such means of drawing close to the divine. Alright, so what he's saying here is, when the verse says, go seek a means to Him, it doesn't mean go seek closeness to Him. It says go seek a means of closeness to Him. Because some people might misinterpret this verse and say that this verse is saying try to get close to God. No. It says try to get close to God through a means. Look for a means to Him. Not look for closeness to Him. Look for closeness to Him through a means. وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ, meaning وَابْتَغُوا الْوَسِيلَةَ إِلَيْهِ, that wasila that's going to get you to Him. Oh, so there's an intermediary between me and God, a wasila that's going to get me to Him. He says that's what the verse is saying. And yes, that is the wording of the verse, but there's another layer to this discussion as well. Let's go to Article 127, see what we have. It says in the previous article, we maintain that tawassul in respect of causes of natural and supernatural provenance pertains to true tawheed. Doesn't go against tawheed, as long as we don't think of them as independent authorities, of course. There is no doubt that carrying out the obligatory duties and recommended practices of religion, such as prayer, fasting, charity, and so on, are all so many means by which man can approach his goal. So that we're opening up the second layer here, brothers and sisters. The second layer of the discussion is, someone might say, all right, you brought this verse. I had said, if you show me a verse that says that there should be something between me and God that gets me to Him and gets me close to Him, that I don't look at independently. Yes, if I had said that, and you showed me this verse now, but I want to interpret this verse for you. That yes, it says, find a means to God's satisfaction and closeness to God. There are things out there that will push you closer to God. But let me tell you what those are. Those are prayer, fasting, and so on. All those, the furu'ud-din that we have. Those get me close to God. So when the Quran says, وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ, go and seek a means, go and seek that which is going to get you closer to Him. What it's talking about is go see what He wants from you, of prayer, of fasting, and so on. And charity and amr ma'ruf and things like that. Who says is talking about people who were righteous individuals who might not even be in the world anymore or have passed away, and I want to seek a means to of closeness to God through them as well. That's not what it's talking about. So this is the second layer of the discussion. What's the answer to this question? He says, Ayatollah Subhani says, look, the verse didn't specify. It said anything that's going to be a means of closeness to Him. And so what this is going to be, it's not going to be restricted, he says. It's not going to be restricted to just worship. Because the furu'ud-din, all of them are a form of worship. Yes? In one way or another. Okay, we have to understand. In one way or another. Most of them at least. In other words, they need an intention of qurbatan ila Allah. And when you do it for closeness and seeking closeness to Allah. Alright, he says, who says wasila is restricted to this? If the Quran had said that وَابْتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ الْوَسِيلَةِ, as-salat was psalm, was zakat, and all these things, that would, what you're saying is true. But it doesn't say that. It didn't specify. It says anything that is a means. So it can be more than this. We have to see if we have proof that there's other things also that are a means that will that can get us closer to Him. Ayatollah Subhani, show us, is there anything else metaphysical that can give us closeness to Allah, that we can invoke and call upon, that will get us closer to Allah? He says, yeah, I'll show you a few more. He says, some of these are as follows. Number one, doing tawassul and taking recourse to the names and qualities of God. Yeah, the Quran tells us to do that. He says here, resorting to the most beautiful names and qualities of God as is said in the Quran. Surah A'raf, verse 180. Unto God belong the most beautiful names, so supplicate Him by means of them. Alright, someone wants to talk to God directly, that's fine, but there's another way of talking to God too. Through His qualities, through His names, calling Him through His names. Someone might say, why should I even have to go through His names? I want to talk to Him directly. Well, you can do that too. But you can say, Ya Allah, and speak to Allah. But here Ayatollah Subhani is saying, no, sometimes it's good to call Him by His names. Yeah. Well, are the names going to do something for me? It's God Himself that's going to do something for me. No, but the names are pointing into His direction. They have everything to do with Him. So why not? Why not? Number two, resorting to the dua of righteous souls. The most lofty kind of such tawassul being in respect of the prophets and saints. One asks them to pray for one in the divine presence. If God is present, divine presence, does it make sense for me to ask a prophet to do dua for me? Why not I just ask God Himself? You know what I'm saying? Brothers and sisters, we have to understand, if invoking other than God is a problem, asking for a prophet to talk to God on my behalf and to try to quote unquote pull strings for me with God, that should be a problem. Yet the Quran, he says, tells us the opposite when it comes to our holy prophet and previous prophets as well. Yes, so for example, Surah Nisa, verse 64, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. If only they had come to you, O Prophet, after they had wronged themselves, and then had sought forgiveness from God, and the Prophet had sought forgiveness for them, they would have verily found God relenting and merciful. Why do they have to go to the Holy Prophet? Why do they even have to approach the Prophet? If they've wronged themselves, then it should be enough. The Quran should say that all they need to do is istaghfarullah. They should ask God for forgiveness. But it doesn't say that. It says they should come to you, O Prophet, ja'uk. And then in your presence, ask Allah for forgiveness, and you also ask for forgiveness for them. And that's something that they've asked the Holy Prophet, right? They have to ask the Holy Prophet, "O Prophet, do istighfar for us." All right, well, question is, isn't God Almighty? Isn't God the one that we're supposed to do to call upon? Isn't God the one who's going to forgive us at the end of the day? Why does someone else have to do it for us and be the intermediary between us and God? Well, that's what it's saying here. If there was a problem with that, the Quran wouldn't mention. Or take the story of the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam and their father Yaqub, where it says, "Ya abana istaghfir lana dhunubana inna kunna khati'in qala sawfa astaghfiru lakum rabbi innahu huwa al-ghafurur rahim." They came to their father after they had been caught, after they admitted to their mistakes. They said, "Oh Father, we threw Yusuf in the well, we got rid of him, we oppressed him. Can you ask God for forgiveness for us?" And then he also says, Yaqub alayhi salam says, "Yes, I will ask God forgiveness for you when the time is right." Question: when I go to the grave of the Holy Prophet and I ask him, "Oh Prophet of Allah, ask Allah for forgiveness for me," what difference does that make than this? Now we'll talk about it. There is a little difference, and some people point that out. That's the third layer of the discussion we'll get to. Another verse. It says, when it's talking about our Holy Prophet again, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالَوْا يَسْتَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَوَّوْا رُؤُوسَهُمْ رَأَيْتَهُمْ يَصُدُّونَ وَهُمْ مُسْتَكْبِرُونَ. Munafiqun, Surah Munafiqun, verse 5. That when it is said unto them, "Come, the messenger of God will seek forgiveness for you," they avert their faces, and thou seest them turning away disdainful. Alright, it's telling them to come and have the Prophet do something for them. The Prophet can cause some closeness because they've distanced themselves because of their sins. And who can bring them closer to God? Who can be the means of bringing them closer to God? The Prophet himself being the intermediary. This is Tawassul, brothers and sisters. So Ayatollah Subhani is driving a point here home. He's driving a point home here that, look, it's okay here. The Quran is talking about it. So what's wrong when we do this? And that is when this third layer of the discussion comes. That they say, some people will say, "Look, what you're saying is right. And we understand that, we agree to that. But what we have a problem with is that this has to do with the death of the Holy Prophet. What you're doing, is after the death of the Holy Prophet. While these verses are talking about when the Prophet was alive. So don't compare these two to each other. As long as the Prophet is alive, you can go and have him as your wasila to Allah. Your wasila to the closest of Allah, as the intermediary between you and God. But when he passes away, it's all over. Right? There's no point as if to speak to him anymore. Alright. This is the biggest challenge right here, brothers and sisters. The other two layers of the discussion weren't too hard. Then this is where the problem arises. And so he says, Ayatollah Subhani, he says, to answer this, we have to cover 2 points. Number one is that if the Holy Prophet, when he dies, calling him does no good anymore, at least let's not call it shirk. Where'd you get that from? Just say it's pointless to call the Prophet. That's better than actually pointing the finger of shirk to people and calling them that. Yes? Where'd you get that from? There's no reason for that. Even if we suppose, so I'm reading off the book now, even if we suppose that the necessary condition for tawassul in respect of a prophet or saint be that the person in question be alive, requesting prayers from them after their death will then only be an inoperative or ineffectual act. It's in vain, it's pointless, in other words. Not a source of shirk. Just because it's not a positive thing and it's not working doesn't mean it's a negative thing now. It's neutral, it's pointless, it's nothing. This point is for the most part forgotten, Ayatollah Subhani says. He says, this thing that I just said, it's important, but lots of people don't pay attention to this. This point is for the most part forgotten in such discussions. It's neglected. And the question of whether a person be alive or dead comes to be regarded as a boundary separating Tawheed from Shirk, he says. This is wonderful what he's saying right now. I'm really appreciating it. I love it. He's right. Just because something is not going to work doesn't mean now it's working against you. Death and life is not the boundary between Tawheed and Shirk, in other words. If we were to accept the condition that the personality resorted to by others for prayers be alive, the question of whether the person be alive or not becomes the criterion only of the effectiveness of tawassul, not a means of determining whether the act expresses tawheed or shirk. So I think he's repeating himself a little here. It's clear what he says. That's wonderful. All right, that's the first point. The second point that he makes is that for tawassul to be effective, there are two conditions. Number one, the one that we are doing tawassul to, we're invoking, has to have intellect, has to have knowledge, has to have understanding, has to have power. That's number one. And number two, there has to be a connection between those who are doing tawassul to him and to that person that they are doing tawassul to. Right? He says when we invoke the prophets or saints and imams and all of that, both of these conditions are met. Right? And so what's the problem here? Let me read. In regards to making such requests from prophets and saints who have passed away, both of these conditions are fulfilled, as can be clearly seen in light of both intellectual and traditional evidence. The reality of life in the realm of the barzakh is well attested both in the Quran and the hadith literature. As we saw in articles 105 and 106. We covered this before, brothers and sisters. Alright, so who says they're dead? First of all, we don't even agree with this idea that life and death is that line by which we separate Tawheed and Shirk from. Okay? But let's just assume that was true. Who says that just like a stone that's sitting there, the body and the personality of the Holy Prophet that's buried in his grave is the same? Who says that? Who says that the Prophet is just like that stone, a dead, lifeless thing? No, we believe that the Prophet is alive still. And so this idea of, oh, he's dead so it's over, that doesn't hold here. So he says they're alive in the barzakh. Even if we assume death is enough of a criterion to make something shirk. Yeah? So, since according to clear Quranic evidence, those martyred in the path of God are alive, it is obvious that the prophets and the saints, many of whom were also martyrs, and even if they weren't martyrs, they're much higher than the martyrs, partake of an even greater degree of life. So they're still alive. So if I'm calling on someone, if I'm invoking a prophet or an imam, am I invoking a dead person? No. Fix up your wording. You're invoking a live person. You just can't comprehend the liveliness of that person, the life of that person, right? Because they're in the barzakh now. As regards the relationship between us and the saints and the prophets, there are many factors from which its reality can be adduced, amongst which we shall mention below the following. So someone might say, well, okay, they're alive, fine, but who says you have a connection to them? He brings us 5 or 6 hadiths and stories here about how, yes, the connection can be made with the prophets or the imams. In other words, no one should say that, okay, they're alive, but they're somewhere where they can't hear us anymore. A connection can't be made with them. Yeah, that was the second condition, right? You have to be able to make a connection with them at least. Be connected to them to invoke them. You should be able to quote unquote dial their number, Well, he says, I will show you that is the case. Okay, let's see. What you got for us, Ayatul Subhani? He says, I'll give you 5 reasons why there is a connection between the barzakhi life and us here. They can hear us. Number 1, all Muslims address the Prophet of Islam at the end of their salat by saying, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Which means, O Prophet, may peace and blessings of God be upon you. Are they all merely paying lip service by doing this or saying this? Does the Prophet not hear or reply to all these greetings? Good point. That's a good point, actually. Why would God tell us to say something like that in our salah if it was pointless and the Prophet wasn't hearing us? Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. No, so he can hear us. A connection can be made. Don't say that they can't hear us or they're totally somewhere else. And number 2, the Prophet gave instructions at the Battle of Badr that all the bodies of the mushrikeen and polytheists be cast into a well. Then he spoke to all of them. It's an interesting story how the Prophet speaks to them. He says, you expelled me from my country, from my city, from my home. You thought like God wasn't going to get you, but eventually God got the best of you and things like that. Right? The Prophet is speaking to these dead bodies that are now in that well or in that ditch or hole or whatever it was. One of his companions asked him, are you talking to the dead? In other words, they can't hear you, they're dead. The Prophet replied, you're not better able to hear than they are. Don't think you hear better than them. They can hear better than you actually. Does that not show that the barzakhi realm is somewhat connected to this realm of ours? Yes, it does. As a result, that second condition is fulfilled, where it said you have to be able to make a connection to them. Yeah, they have to be they're alive. They can hear us. They can have intellect. They have power to do things, and we can make a connection with them because of these stories. Number 3, the Prophet frequently would visit the Baqi' graveyard and address the souls of those buried there, saying, peace be with the people of the homes of the believing men and the believing women. In another narration, he is reported to have said, peace be with you, abode of believing folk. Alright, so he's speaking to these people. If they weren't hearing him, he shouldn't speak in first person. He should speak in third person. He should say, peace be upon those who have died. He says, peace be upon you, the ones who are dwelling in this land of the barzakh and in the graves. Number 4, it is narrated in Bukhari's Sahih. So Ayatollah Subhani here is referring to Sahih Bukhari. Of course, the Shia don't find that as a reliable hadith source, just like how our brothers of Sunni school, they don't believe in Usul al-Kafi the way we do. So it's both ways. Anyway, Ayatollah Subhani here, he refers to Sahih Bukhari even to show that, look, it's even in those sources, things that we can use. It says that on the day that the Prophet died, Abu Bakr went to the house of Aisha. Then he went to the Prophet's body, took the cloth from his face, kissed him, cried, and then said, may my father be your ransom, may be he your sacrifice. O Prophet of God, God has not decreed 2 deaths for you. The one that was decreed for you has come to pass. And so he's speaking to the Holy Prophet. The thing is, if, according to the Sunni school of thought, we can get the deen also from the Sahaba, like Abu Bakr, here he's speaking to the Holy Prophet. So it shows that the Holy Prophet can hear him. In other words, a connection can be made with him. Yes, communication in this, a one-way communication can take place. He might be responding, we can't hear him, but he can hear us for sure. Alright, so he can hear us, comprehend what we're saying and register what we're saying. He has power from Allah. Of course he has power from Allah. He's the highest of all creatures. He has all of that, yet still I say, no, I can't invoke him because I'm supposed to only invoke God. Where's the dalil for that? Where's the reason for that? So he can hear us. He says, if the Prophet were not alive in the barzakh and there were consequently no possible relationship between us and them and him, How could Abu Bakr have addressed him in this way? And finally, when Imam Ali was washing the body of the Prophet, he said to him, "My father and mother be your ransom, O Messenger of God. With your death, something is brought to an end which is not brought to an end with the death of anyone else. The stream of prophecy, the revelation of heavenly knowledge and tidings. Remember us with your Lord and keep us close to your heart." So it's Imam Ali is doing tawassul here. Now, of course, this is Nahjul Balagha, so this is a Shi'i source. Although we believe that no, there are lots of Ahlus Sunnah as well who believe in Nahjul Balagha, but there are some who might not as well believe in Nahjul Balagha. But anyway, point being that these are 5, and there are more other proofs as well. He's kept it to 5 proofs that a connection can be made with Alam al-Barzakh, at least a one-way connection where they hear us. He says, finally, let us note that tawassul in respect of the prophets and saints or imams takes various forms on which detailed commentaries can be found in theological treatises. This is something, as I said in the beginning of the talk, that goes on and on and on. There are so many other aspects and layers to it. Great scholars from both schools of thought, they will go back and forth on this topic, and to be honest with you, you probably won't come to a conclusion. If you're of the Shia school, then you will probably believe in it. If you're from the Sunni school, depends on which scholars you choose to follow. But at the end of the day, what matters is to understand that, okay, it's not just a blind invocation of dead people who can't hear or do anything for us. No, there's a lot more to it. And those who do practice tawassul, they have their reasons for that as well. Alright, so that we will end with this. Tawassul. For our next session, he's going to go into another topic, which is a complicated one. I feel it's a simple one, but it is complicated when it's brought into words and theological discussion revolves around it, and that is the concept of bada. One of my friends actually just recently sent me a new book which has to do with bada, and it's like a book that's written on it. So he wants to cover it in one article. So I guess he's just going to go over some of the main points. Bada is also one of those things that the Shia have. We have our explanation of it, and others might have another explanation of it. Inshallah, we'll continue this discussion next week. I thank all of you for joining us and staying with us till the end. MashaAllah, I've noticed that those who joined have all been with us till the end. Inshallah, till next week, keep us in your du'as. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.